Hello, students. Professor Oling here to talk to you about Joyce Carol Oates's novel Them. We have a paper due on it in a week, next Sunday after Thanksgiving. This talk is designed for all students. Maybe you're making progress already on your thesis and your argument, and you're doing pretty well. This might just be one more view of the book, a couple new perspectives on it, might help you to stay enthusiastic about your own topic and thesis and just give you a little extra inspiration. It's also designed for students who are struggling more with the thesis or argument. Maybe when you look through the instruction sheet, you knew who you wanted to write about, focus on, or you had some idea of your main thesis or theme, but you need an extra little push here. I'm going to offer some views of the book here. You can let them inspire you a bit, but don't borrow them wholesale. If you end up taking a lot from the video, make sure you make it your own. Make sure that you apply your own evidence and perspective, even if you draw some ideas from this discussion. All right, double spaced, 4 pages, due next Sunday, right after Thanksgiving. Let me offer these three new takes. So the first one I'm going to talk about fear in the book, but not like animal fear, panic, not terror, not like in a horror movie kind of fear. I'm more worried about a kind of generalized sense of anxiety that can inhibit people, a fear of failure or longer term fears. Um, and I'm going to show you guys how I think Loretta, Maureen, Jules deal with a crisis pretty well, but sometimes long term concerns, they allow fear to come into their long term plans too much. So, Loretta, let's deal with her first. Obviously, the morning that she woke to find Bernie murdered next to her, and she knew that her brother Brock had done it, does she worry in that instant for her own life? No. She knows that Brock is fleeing. Um, as she realizes what the situation really entails, she gets a lot more anxious. She realizes that Bernie's people, his family, could come after her. This is why she goes kind of irrationally looking for a gun. And she goes to Rita's. But it's also in this process where she sees Howard and she figures out that this acquaintance can help her out of this terrible bind. If she asks for Howard's help, she'll literally be putting herself, into the arms of the police. And that's a fairly safe place. If you're talking about like being in a panic that somebody else's family is going to come after you to kill you. So to avoid being, attacked or killed by Bernie's people, she has to be absorbed into the Wendell family. That at first doesn't seem too terrifying, right? It saves her life. It puts her in a comparatively safe and good place, right? Um, her life with the Wendells is, if anything, easier than it had been previously. But notice how under the Wendells she has to live, right? She really has little authority in that household. It's Grandma Wendell who's clearly in charge there. And I feel like it means that by joining their family, she's more adopted as a almost a child into the family than accepted as a young wife who will one day, you know, be an adult mother with children. Loretta never really seems to me to grow up. And I think a lot of it has to do with the way that she compromised her own dreams and what she could become by doing the safer thing, right? Uh, Attaching herself to Howard and the Wendells. Later in life, the irony is that at the end of the book, after three husbands or two husbands and possibly a third, um, she probably no more kind of thinks about her life as long-term goals or dreams. She seems to just kind of be getting by. Uh, and she does seem to be a less fearful person. Um, but there's still sense that there's so much distrust of the world. She does feel betrayed by the world, and I think in some ways she'll have to always seek the protection of somebody else. Harold now is the character at the end who's probably going to come in and be um, Loretta's protector. So it's interesting. 1967, height of the feminist movement. I'm sure that Loretta would be very anti-feminist, right? Given what we know about her. But it is kind of interesting that part of that sense of her not liking um, protesters and feminists, there are people who are kind of demanding more. And long ago, she said, "Well, um, I'm going to kind of cower beneath others. I'm not going to boldly make claims for what I'm owed." Maureen, the opposite of her mother, or a strange imitator of her mother? I think it's certainly both. How she goes about it is the opposite of how her mother did, but in many ways, Maureen is also saying a woman in that era, especially a woman from a poor household, a poor background, can't make any kind of claims of independence, can't strike out on her own. Look what happened the first time that Maureen tried to do that secretly, right? She has to do what her mother did, which is grow really fearful and guarded and kind of contrive a future, seek shelter for the future rather than uh, embrace the unknown. So she picks Jim Randolph because she thinks she's got his number, right? He's passed her test for knight in shining armor. But you guys should be able to tell that there's a lot of problems that are going to be ahead for Jim and Maureen in this new marriage. He's leaving his wife and his children. Isn't he going to be very isolated? Um, his own children are probably going to, in time, resent him. His family, if they want to stay close to his children from his first marriage, they may side with the ex-wife. All of the friends that he and the ex-wife had are probably going to side with the ex-wife. So Maureen's ruthlessness here, it's all about, getting herself into a safe place, but I don't know how solid this new vision of the future is going to be. I always think of the Three Little Pigs when I think of Maureen because she seems to be trying to build a house for safety. I don't think she's realizing that in the long run, the foundation's home, any real home, has to be not just physical, right? It can't just be a house somewhere. It has to be emotional and spiritual. The foundation has to be sound for inner reasons, not just, like it looks like something out of a picture book. All right. Last character to deal with from this theme of fear that we make a fearful, and out of fear, we make a decision that gets us through the moment, but makes us too wary in life, is Jules. Because he does seem the most fearless of the three. And he doesn't do what his sister Maureen does, which is try to carefully plan something that could serve as like a shelter or haven for the world. He keeps going back out into the world. Um, he was almost killed by the police officer, uh, and he returns to the streets of Detroit. He's almost killed by Nadine, and he never really examines what happened there and how he, in a sense, left himself vulnerable. Here's the key to Jules and fear. He does live through all those things, but I think early on he had to learn a wariness of the world. It seemed like the world was trying to kill him, and so in some ways he's always on alert. He's never really um, vulnerable. He never really lets his guard down. Um, he never looks at those things that have betrayed him in certain ways. Not just Nadine, but I think in some ways his mother has betrayed him. And he hasn't looked at the pattern of why he's loyal to Nadine, loyal to his mother, loyal to the past in certain ways. Um, to see if maybe that's part of the problem. That's a different kind of fearfulness, fearlessness, isn't it? He's physically, he has courage. Physically, he's somewhat fearless. Uh, but I do think that Jules is also, hmm, he wears too much armor. He's too guarded. He's too mistrustful of everything in existence. Um, and at some point, I think he's going to have to realize that without looking inward to himself and confronting what he's done and confronting everything in his life, he won't be able to find a direction forward. This idea of always attaching himself to somebody and then drifting on to the next thing, because that's what happened with the whole trip to California, right? That's just something that Mort was able to improvise, but it doesn't have any substance to it. It doesn't have anything solid to it. Probably for the same reasons that Maureen's dreams of the future don't either. They're not heartfelt. So there you go. That's one more take on Maureen, Loretta, and Jules, that they allow anxiety to rule too much, even if they're brave in dealing with particular situations. The other theme I was going to offer, kind of briefly here for time reasons, is the idea that because they all had to grow up too quickly, that Jules, Maureen, and Loretta are all, they feel kind of ancient to me. Like it's almost if the world has grown really old, um, just trying to survive in this fashion. We have to have hope, right? We have to have joy. We have to have something to look forward to. We have to have hope of the future to feel kind of hopeful about life and to feel kind of youthful, unburdened by problems. And this is a concern for all three characters. Think about how the end of the book, it is set in the late 60s, an era that, at least according to pop culture, it was, the Beatles, the British invasion, the Beatles were arriving, the Rolling Stones, new music, people's fashion changes were changing by the year. Um, Magazines and TV looked much more colorful than they did in the past. TV shows like Laugh-In started to like have this kind of 60s psychedelic style. It's in retrospect, I think some of it's kind of silly and rainbow colored. But isn't it interesting that that's what's going on in the culture, and none of the Wendells can embrace that. And I think this ties to this idea that somehow for the Wendells and people stuck in their situation, history seems to have left them behind. They can't be part of this wave of change that seems to be going on, at least if you watch the news in that era, but also seem to kind of curiously separate different portions of society and almost make someone like the Wendells, any of the Wendells, seem cut off in time. And the last thought I put out for you guys is home. Uh, I don't want to judge the Wendells, but we all need a happy, healthy home. And I do think that behind it all, that is what the three of them were seeking. Uh, how does one make a claim that you deserve to be able to be working towards your own future home that would be something solid and real and wouldn't be gone in an instant the way that Loretta's is? This is a question maybe even more for Maureen and Jules because they're younger and they have to at some point ask themselves, is the home that I'm constructing, this place in the future that I don't want to keep moving about, I want to settle down, is that something that I'm really building in my heart? Or is that something like Maureen seems to be doing, where it's constructed wholly in the part of the mind that's just calculating for survival? And Jules, especially, I'm concerned, doesn't seem to realize uh, that it's not enough to float through the world, uh, that we have to put down roots. Even in a city like Detroit, the soul needs to put down roots uh, and feel like the nurturance that you're getting is more than just for the moment. All right, so does fear rule the lives of the Wendells? Uh, have they grown old with their resistance to new things? And where is the home? Oh, if it's not in the heart.